Let's go ahead and get started. So this screen is Presidential Valley is kind of our test association. It's the one that the property managers can train on. They can put transactions in and try things and learn things in here instead of doing it in your live community. So the first time that they might do something new, they can try it in here and make sure that they know how to do it correctly, and then do it. And we do that for accounting and other people too. So Presidential Valley, you'll notice many of our owners have presidential names. The one that that we're working with tonight is George Washington. So a couple of months ago, I introduced everybody on that board education event to this tool, but really nobody had the board access yet. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the first board item, which is board action items. So we are able to queue up requests for the board to do things within an action item that we have. So we might need, so for instance, we could on the fee waiver request we had that I showed you earlier, we could queue that up so that it there's a step in the fee waiver process, which is a board step. We're not currently doing that step, meaning we're not having it pop up into the portal and then having the board be notified that way. So today, if there's a fee waiver request, we would probably email the board member and ask them for if there was a board member authorized to make a fee waiver, they could, or they could bring it to the next meeting, discuss it, vote on it, and then get back to us. But we have the ability to put the board items that we need decisions on in here. And we'll probably look to do that with some associations that are comfortable with that sometime in the future. But there's a lot of capabilities in here that we're not using yet, but we'll probably use sometime in the future. Okay, homeowners is the next screen. This is one I like to show. Notice up here you can check previous owners and look at owners from the past. Remember when we converted to the system, we didn't import all the old owners, so a lot of them won't show up right now. But as people move in the future, by checking that button, you'll see the prior owners. We have been putting tags in some associations. Tags are ways to associate a homeowner with a particular thing. So for instance, we could, I always use this example, we could create a tag which is house color, and we could have pink as one of the value options, and anybody who has a pink house, we could flag that, and you could communicate, you could filter on just people that have pink houses. So that's how flexible it is. So how have we used it so far? We have some associations that have homes that are single family and townhome in the same association. And so we've created tags that are called single family and tags that are called townhome, and we turn one or the other on for each property. So if you want to just communicate to the townhome owners, you can do that. Or if you want to filter for this, in this case, list just the homeowners that are townhome owners, you could do that. There's no limit to the amount of tags we can put in the system. We're trying not to get crazy with that right now, but obviously if there's a need, we're definitely willing to take a look at that. Also with each one of these, so each one of these is a homeowner. The names of the homeowners show up here that we have in the system. So there's the general information that shows up here is account number, homeowner, address, email, and balance. So I'll get questions like this. Dan, how many email addresses, how many people do we have that have email addresses in the association? So I could go in here and say is empty. And this is, let me see, I'll change this to 250. I don't know how many homeowners we have in here, but now you can see how many people in the system that don't have an email address. You know, if you want to see people that have Yahoo addresses, I can say contains Yahoo, and there's only one Yahoo email address in here. So obviously these aren't things you might normally do. I'm just trying to point out that you can filter on different things to get maybe a specific list of homeowners that, you know, if you want to get homeowners that are on a certain street, you could put the street name in here and filter on that. You can filter on multiple columns at the same time. There's other things you can do here. So you can sort on that column, ascending, descending. You can also add other columns. So here's all the information that is available to you on a homeowner. So I think phone number is not showing in here. So I'll click on phone and then go back. And now you see phone numbers are showing. But the other columns are still here. It just added phone numbers. By the way, here's the balance for everybody. So things that I do on the balance side is, so I might say, these are not necessarily people in collection, but that people that have balances, okay? So if I say is greater than, so maybe your late fee is $50. So I just want to see, I don't want to see people who just have a late fee hanging on their account. So I might say $55. So I said greater than, if you noticed, I said greater than whatever the amount was in here, which is 55. So these are all the people that have balances greater than $55. Okay, again, just click the X and it clears it out. Now, anything that is showing here, so you can add all kinds of columns, you can sort them, you can filter, however you want. When you get the list you want, you can actually export it to Excel if you want to keep it. And then there's a settings button here. So reset resets the default settings. But if you change, like I changed this to 250 owners per screen instead of 10, if you want to save that, then you just click Save Grid Settings. Now, every time you go into this screen, it should show you 250 owners on the screen, up to 250 owners on the screen. Okay, this is a great screen, especially if you're trying to, you know, figure out a certain number or a certain number of homeowners that have a certain situation. So, collections. These are homeowners that have been turned over for collection. I think we'll find that George has been turned over to collection in here, but this is the status of them, balance, the description of the status, and then there can be attachments in here too. So there is a collections action item that gets started. And so one of the things that we're going to be doing is allowing attorneys direct access into Vanica so that they can pull ledgers for homeowners automatically out of our system. So for instance, KSN, I think, has 50% of our associations with them, they'll probably be the first one that we enable for that. But all the main attorneys will probably eventually get them turned on. We do have to pay for each attorney we allow access in here. So, you know, if it's a one-off attorney, we probably won't be doing that. But for the main attorney groups that do association collections, we'll be working on turning all those on eventually. And again, you can do a drop down if there's any messages. So just like the action items I showed you before, if there's any communications on these items, then they would show up in there. Okay, violations. So all your violations that are currently active are going to show in here. Again, all the same principles. You have the ability to sort. You have the ability to add more columns. You have the ability to filter, just like I showed you in the homeowner screen. You can hit the drop down arrow and see if there's been any communications on the violations. And if there's any attachments, you can see them here. These are live, so this is not something that's synchronized nightly, or you're looking live in the system. So, you know, when a manager gets back from an inspection, you know, after allowing a certain amount of time for them to enter those violations, then you should be able to see them right away. I did want to mention that we do have a phone app that right now it's only available on Androids and on iPhones, and only some of our managers currently have iPhones. Vanica's working on releasing it on Androids as well, but they have the managers have the ability to actually enter the violations while they're on the property, and even take a picture of the violation and attach it to the violation with their phone right there. Typically, they wouldn't activate the violation right then and there, but they'll kind of let them all sit into a pending queue, and then when they get back to the office, they'll go through them all, make sure that, you know, they've fully put in the wording they want, that their grammar's good and all that stuff, and then they'll post them all and they'll show up in the system. So it's a really nice capability. Our plan is to have all managers capable of doing that over the next few months. So we're working on that with the managers. But I mentioned this the last time we talked about the portal, but we got so much new stuff in the new system, and we can't just turn it all on day one. So we have to go through and we have to train people on it. We have to put internal procedures for it. You know, there's a lot of work to do to turn new stuff on. And so we're doing it in phases over time. The portal was one of our really priority things to do. And so that was one of the first things that we made available. Made it available to homeowners first, board members second. And by the way, we should have activated all board members. So if you're not in there, if you can't see these board options, talk to your manager and they can get you turned on. And then committee members is the next phase. So so even within the portal, there's a lot of different things that we can do with it that we're turning on little by little, and we'll keep you guys apprised as we do those things. Okay, so the next screen is ARC. So we already talked a little bit about architectural requests. So here are some architectural requests that are in the system. So I want to be very clear that we have not enabled this en masse. If there are ARC requests in the system, you will see them in here. So as a board member, you can see them in here. But a follow-on activity that we're going to enable is actually allowing you to define who is on your architectural committee. So you can either be a member or a chairperson. Members, even if they're not board members, will be able to see the architectural requests in the system. So they won't get all the board options, but they'll get the architectural request, be able to see the architectural requests. The architectural request chairperson will actually be able to approve or deny them in the system, in the portal. Now, what I don't mean that they'll be making that decision, because the way it's supposed to work is the architectural committee votes, but then the chairperson could go into the system and indicate for that particular one whether it was approved or denied. So I'm going to say it again, we have not enabled that en masse. We have a couple of associations that we started testing with this. But that's something we hope to be enabling in the near future. It's kind of the next thing we have on our list for the portal after we get all the homeowners invited, which, as I told you, should be by sometime in September. Sometime in September that we'll have all the mass invitations out, and then we'll switch around and start working on the ARC committees. Okay, I'm going to work orders. So here are all the work orders in the system. Again, all the same rule. You have the open, closed. You have all these options up here that we've talked about before. You do have a little hamburger menu on this one. So the only option on there is to message. So you could message on this particular one. So if you're a board member, even though it's not, I mean, this one in particular is in board review, but are all these in board review? It looks like there's only two, both in board review. So board review doesn't necessarily mean it's going to show up in your board action items like we talked about previously. It just may mean that we're waiting to, it's in the step in the action item where we're waiting to hear back from the board on something, but and haven't gotten it yet. So so in the future that might show up in the board action items that were in board review, and I think though these did show up in that board action item screen. We look up there. Service request board review, service request board review. So those are those two items. All right. The last screen is invoices. This created a little bit of panic with a few board members. I'm just kind of saying that in jest, but so a lot of our board members really love Strongroom, and when they saw this, they were afraid we were getting rid of Strongroom and using Vantica to approve invoices. The reality is we could use Vantica to approve invoices, but it doesn't have the same feature-rich capability that Strongroom has. Strongroom's a little bit better. So the invoices show here, but we're not using this screen to approve any invoices. So in fact, we may end up removing this screen because we don't want to confuse anybody. But when an invoice goes into Strongroom, Strongroom tells Vantica about it, and the invoice will show up in this screen. So it's, but they're typically in Vantica in some, I'm sorry, they're in Strongroom at some level of pending approval in there. So no current plans to change away from Strongroom, but just like anything, you know, years down the line, maybe Vantica gets stronger than, you know, gets more feature rich than Strongroom. We could potentially choose to change, but there's no plans to do that anytime soon. I didn't mention it earlier, but Vantica is constantly adding new capabilities to the system. So monthly, they release both bug fixes and new features. And so we're always looking at those things and figuring out if there's something in there that would be useful to us or the board or the homeowners. Okay, I'm just going to take a couple of minutes and talk about the service request because somebody asked. Again, there's many different kinds of action items in the system, and I'm doing it from memory, so I probably won't get it exactly right. But generally, how a service request works is it starts out as a general service request. Service requests can be almost anything, right? We talked about that earlier. So we can assign a service request to a customer service person, a property manager, an accounts receivable person, an accounts payable person. So there's steps for each of those. And when we assign it to one of those roles, the system knows what person in our organization is your customer service person, or what person is the manager. So once it's assigned to the customer service person, it shows up in the queue of your assigned customer service person. And then, as I mentioned, there's other things in their queue, so they're working through their queue and clearing those things out daily. So they'll look at it and say, oh, this looks like it's gonna need a maintenance person to go out and fix something. So anytime we have a situation where a service request is gonna turn into a work order, it goes to the manager for approval. When the manager gets it, they'll step the action item to the step for manager approval. When the manager gets it, if they know that the board needs to approve that service request, that work order, they're going to reach out to the board and get approval before they approve it. That's typically going to be through an email. Might be a phone call where we ask you to send an email with your approval. Once that occurs, the property manager will approve it. But there could be certain work orders that the board and the property manager have agreed that the property manager can just take care of. In those cases, the property manager is not going to reach out to the board. They're just going to approve it. And once that happens, they're going to step it to the step where the service provider gets assigned, so they can actually pick the service provider and pick the email, because the service provider might have multiple different emails. They can pick the email that's correct to send a service request to that particular provider. By the way, we provide maintenance services. We get our maintenance tickets for associations the same way. So whether it's a third-party maintenance provider or one of our maintenance techs, we get the work orders assigned to us the same way the other vendors get them assigned to them. So as I told you at the beginning, when the service request starts, the homeowner is notified via email. So that's a place where we do not mail a notice to the homeowner. If they put paper instead of email as their preference, we're not mailing them a notice that we opened a service request for them. So it's a courtesy notice via email. Then when it gets assigned to the tech, another courtesy notice automatically gets generated and sent to the homeowner via email. Once it's assigned to a tech, it goes into a holding pattern. I believe the default holding number of days is 5 days. So it disappears from everybody's queue and just sits in the background for 5 days. If the tech calls in at any time and says, or emails in and says, hey, I finished this, we may go and do some checking and make sure that everything is good with it. Maybe we wait until the manager does an inspection of it before we close it, but then they can actually go in and pull it out of its waiting status and mark it as complete. But let's say 5 days go by and it doesn't get completed. It wakes up, shows up in the queue of the customer service person and basically says, hey, this work order is still out here. Haven't heard anything from you about it. Update me. And so the customer service might call the tech and say, hey, what's the status on this? And he goes, oh, I finished it 2 days ago. Sorry, I forgot to call you, which, by the way, happens a lot. And so then they'll mark it as complete. Or the tech might say, oh, haven't been able to get out there yet. Well, when do you think you can get out there? Well, next couple of days. So they can send an update to the homeowner saying, sorry, the tech hasn't gotten out there yet. It should be there in the next couple of days. Then it goes back into its holding pattern for another 5 days. That keeps happening, and it keeps popping back into the customer service queue until it gets resolved. So it's not a lot of systems, of association management systems. You log the work order. Somebody has to go in and check occasionally to see what's still sitting out there. And a lot of times that doesn't happen, or it might happen just once a month. But in our system, it's waking up every 5 days and asking the customer service person what the status of it is. And so believe me, if they have a lot of work orders going on, they're going to want to get those things resolved and closed as soon as possible. So it's just a nice way to kind of, we call it a tickler or whatever, that it keeps showing itself up in their work queue and asking them where it's at. So you shouldn't have to call and ask them because the system's asking them. But the homeowner could call in at any time and ask as well. So I'm not saying that it's all electronic, but hopefully that gives you a bit of a feel for how a service request / work order would kind of go through our system. Okay. So just wanted to say thank you to everybody for joining. Hopefully this has worked out well. And as I mentioned, we hope to do many more of our board education events. Thank you again for attending, and look forward to the next one that we have. Take care and have a good evening.